Hello and welcome. Find your quiet place, a comfortable corner where the day's persistent noise can fade into the background, and prepare your mind for a journey. Tonight, we are not visiting a place of warmth and light. We are traveling to the frozen heart of the desolate, formidable wilderness of Soviet Russia. Deep in the Ural Mountains, we are heading to a remote, windswept mountain slope in the dead of a brutal winter. To a place where the silence is so profound, so absolute, that it feels like a physical presence pressing in on you from all sides. A place that became the final silent witness to one of the most baffling, terrifying, and enduring mysteries of the entire 20th century. This is a story of 9 young lives cut tragically short, of a scene so bizarre and so contradictory that it defies any simple, logical explanation, and of a puzzle that has haunted investigators, researchers, and armchair detectives for more than 6 decades. This is the story of the Dyatlov Pass incident. Now, you may have heard the name of this case before. It has become a cornerstone of modern unexplained phenomena. You may have heard the official explanation, the one that has recently been re-endorsed by Russian authorities after a new investigation. A simple, tragic, and ultimately mundane avalanche. A slab of snow, a moment of panic. A sad but understandable end. But tonight, we are going to venture far beyond that simple, tidy explanation. We are going to look deeper. We will pull open the dusty, long-classified case file, and we will examine the strange, unsettling, and often deeply disturbing details that the avalanche theory struggles, and in many cases utterly fails to explain. We will explore the evidence that points not to a simple natural disaster, but to something far stranger, something more complex, something that hints at forces beyond our normal comprehension. We will discuss the inexplicable, crushing internal injuries suffered by the victims, injuries a doctor compared to the force of a car crash, yet with no external signs of impact. We will examine the perplexing and still unexplained discovery of significant levels of radioactivity on their clothing. And we will delve into the persistent, chilling, and officially corroborated reports of strange orange spheres and mysterious silent lights seen maneuvering in the sky on that fateful night. This is the Dyatlov Pass incident. More than an avalanche. Our story, as all good stories do, begins not with death but with life. It begins with youth, with infectious optimism, and with the boundless spirit of adventure. The year is 1959. The place is the Ural Polytechnic Institute in the bustling industrial city of Sverdlovsk, now known as Ekaterinburg, deep in the heart of the Soviet Union. A close-knit group of 10 experienced young hikers and skiers, most of them students or recent graduates of the institute, are meticulously planning an ambitious winter expedition. They are not casual adventurers. They are all what the Russians of that era called tourists, a term that in this specific context means something closer to highly skilled, semi-professional wilderness trekkers. They are all certified Grade 2 hikers, and this trek is meant to be their final, qualifying challenge to achieve the prestigious Grade 3 certification, the highest honor available for outdoorsmen in the Soviet Union. This was a serious undertaking by a serious and highly competent group. Their leader is a 23-year-old radio engineering student named Igor Dyatlov. He is described by all who knew him as serious, capable, intensely focused, and a respected leader. He was known for his meticulous planning and his quiet confidence. The rest of the group is a vibrant collection of bright, athletic, and adventurous young people, a perfect snapshot of the best and brightest of Soviet youth in the post-Stalinist thaw. There is Zina Kolmogorova, a 22-year-old engineering student, known for being fiery, determined, and one of the most experienced members of the group. There is Ludmila Dubinina, a 20-year-old economics student, known for her courage, her infectious smile, and her beautiful singing voice that often filled their campsites. There is Alexander Kolevatov, a 24-year-old physics student from a privileged background, known for being methodical and reserved. Rustam Slobodin, a 23-year-old engineer, described as tough, athletic, and resilient. Yuri Krivonischenko, 23, and Yuri Doroshenko, 21, were two cheerful and popular students, often the jokers of the group. Nikolai Thibault-Brignol, 23, a charismatic engineer of French descent, was known for his good humor and for bringing his mandolin on their treks. And then there was Semyon Alexander Zolotaryov. He was the oldest and most mysterious member of the group. At 38, he was significantly older than the others. He was a combat veteran of the Second World War, a physical education instructor, and a hiking guide. He had joined the expedition at the last minute, and his presence was somewhat unusual in a tight-knit student group. He had strange tattoos, including a 5-pointed star and the name Gina, which were not typical for a man of his background. His inclusion has fueled endless speculation over the years. The 10th member of the initial party, a young geology student named Yuri Yudin, will, by a simple twist of fate and physical ailment, be the sole survivor of the Dyatlov group. Their plan is ambitious and extremely arduous. They will travel by train and truck to the northernmost settlements of the vast Sverdlovsk Oblast, and from there, they will ski and trek over 300 kilometers through the harsh, completely uninhabited winter wilderness of the northern Ural Mountains. The expedition is set to culminate in an ascent of a mountain called Gora Otorten, a name which in the language of the indigenous Mansi people means, "Don't go there." It is a challenging, grueling trek, but for a group of their proven skill and experience, it was seen as an entirely achievable goal. On January 27th, the expedition proper begins. The group is in high spirits, documented in the diaries and photographs they meticulously kept. These records, which were later recovered from the tent, are a poignant window into their last living days. They paint a picture of a normal, happy, and highly competent group of young people, working well together, laughing, singing songs, and facing the considerable challenges of the Arctic wilderness with skill, resilience, and good humor. They were not novices. They were experts in their element. On the 4th day of their trek, Yuri Yudin, who had been suffering from a flare-up of severe joint pain and sciatica, makes the difficult decision to turn back. The pain is too great for him to continue. It is a decision that undoubtedly and miraculously saves his life. He says a sad goodbye to his 9 friends, helping Ludmila Dubinina with a small repair before he leaves. He watches as they ski away, a small, determined group disappearing into the vast white emptiness of the landscape. It is the last time any of them will be seen alive. The remaining 9 hikers, 7 men and 2 women, continue their journey. According to their diaries and the photos developed from their recovered cameras, they proceeded according to plan for the next several days. The photos show them skiing through dense forests, building fires, and smiling for the camera, full of life. On February 1st, they began to make their way up a mountain pass that would lead them towards their goal of Otorten. The mountain they were now on is called Kholat Syakhl, a name which, in the Mansi language, translates to a chillingly, impossibly prophetic name, Dead Mountain. The weather on that day was rapidly deteriorating. A fierce winter storm, a common occurrence in the Urals, was moving in, bringing with it high winds, plummeting temperatures, and blinding, disorienting snow. The group seems to have lost their way in the poor visibility. They deviated from their planned route, which would have taken them through a more sheltered pass, and ended up on the exposed eastern slope of the mountain. Realizing their mistake and facing a worsening storm, Igor Dyatlov made a fateful and deeply puzzling decision. Instead of retreating back down the slope to the more sheltered forest line, which was only about a mile away, he decided to make camp right there on the open, windswept slope of Dead Mountain. It was a highly unusual decision for an experienced leader like Dyatlov. Camping on an exposed slope in a blizzard is tactically unsound and dangerous. It violates basic mountaineering principles. But perhaps he thought it was safer than trying to navigate back down in whiteout conditions. Perhaps he wanted to practice high-altitude camping. Or perhaps he saw something that made him stop. Whatever the reason, they pitched their large canvas tent, ate a small meal of salted pork fat and crackers, and settled in for the night. Sometime on the night of February 1st, or in the early hours of February 2nd, something happened. Something terrifying. Something so sudden, so powerful, and so overwhelming that it caused these 9 experienced, rational, and tough young adventurers to do something that is, by any measure of logic or survival instinct, completely and utterly insane. They cut their way out of their tent from the inside. They slashed and sliced through the thick, frozen canvas walls with a knife, and they fled, in a state of what can only be described as profound animalistic panic, into the lethal sub-zero wilderness. They ran without their boots, without their heavy coats, without their hats or their gloves. They ran out into a raging blizzard, in temperatures that were likely 30 degrees below 0 Celsius, with a brutal, punishing wind chill on top of that. They ran towards a certain agonizing death. And they never looked back. The plan was for Igor Dyatlov to send a telegram back to their sports club in Sverdlovsk no later than February 12th to signal the successful completion of their trek. When the 12th came and went with no word, there was initially no great alarm. Delays were common on such expeditions. But as the days turned into a week, and the silence from the group continued, their families and friends began to grow deeply concerned, and then to demand action. On February 20th, a full-scale search and rescue operation, involving civilian volunteers, the Army, and the Air Force, was launched. On February 26th, a volunteer search pilot spotted it from the air. The collapsed, partially buried, and abandoned remains of a single tent on the slope of Kholat Syakhl. A ground team of searchers, including a student who had helped Dyatlov plan the route, was dispatched. What they found at the campsite was the beginning of one of the greatest mysteries of the 20th century. The tent was half buried in snow and badly damaged, but it was clear that it had been deliberately cut open from the inside. There were several long slits in the canvas, large enough for a person to crawl through. Inside the tent, all of the group's belongings were found, neatly arranged. Their boots were lined up by the entrance. Their warm coats, their spare clothes, their axes, their medical kit, their maps, their food, and crucially, their money and valuables were all untouched. This was clearly not a robbery. Outside the tent, a trail of footprints, 9 distinct sets of them, led away from the tent and down the long, gentle slope towards the tree line, nearly a mile away. The footprints themselves told a bizarre and desperate story. They showed that the hikers had been wearing only socks, or a single felt boot, or were completely barefoot, their bare skin pressed into the deadly cold of the snow. The tracks were orderly. They showed people walking, not running in a panicked frenzy, down the hill in a single file line. The investigators followed the tracks. They led them down the long slope to the edge of the forest. There, under a large ancient cedar tree, the searchers found the first signs of a desperate struggle for survival. They found the remains of a small, hastily built fire. And next to the fire, they found the first 2 bodies. They were Yuri Krivonischenko and Yuri Doroshenko. They were stripped down to their underwear. Their hands were burned and scraped raw, as if they had been trying to get warm from a fire that was too small to offer any real heat. The branches on the massive cedar tree above them were broken up to a height of 15 feet, suggesting one or both of them had frantically tried to climb the tree. Were they trying to get a better view of the distant tent? Or were they trying to escape from something or someone on the ground? The official cause of death for both men was determined to be hypothermia. They had frozen to death. From the cedar tree, another set of tracks led back up the slope, in the direction of the tent. It seemed a small group had tried to return. About halfway between the tree and the tent, the searchers found the body of Igor Dyatlov, the group's leader. He was lying on his back in the snow, his face pointed towards the camp. One hand was clutching a small birch branch as if for support. He seemed to have been trying to crawl back to the safety of the tent when he finally succumbed to the cold. A little further up the slope, they found the body of Zinaida Kolmogorova, also facing the tent, her hands and knuckles abraded, as if from a desperate, final crawl through the frozen, crusty snow. A bit further still, they found the body of Rustam Slobodin. He had a small, non-lethal fracture in his skull, an injury some thought consistent with a fall, but like the others, the official cause of death was listed as hypothermia. These three seemed to have made a desperate, heroic, but ultimately futile attempt to return to the shelter they had so inexplicably fled. And then the trail went cold. The remaining 4 hikers were nowhere to be found. For 2 long, agonizing months, the massive search operation continued. The military and civilian volunteers scoured the mountainside. Finally, in early May, as the deep winter snowpack, which was over 15 feet deep in some places, began to melt under the spring sun, the last 4 bodies were discovered. They were found buried under a thick layer of snow in a deep wooded ravine, about 75 meters further into the woods from the cedar tree. And it is with the discovery and subsequent autopsy of these last 4 bodies, Lyudmila Dubinina, Alexander Kolevatov, Nikolai Thibault-Brignol, and the mysterious Semyon Zolotaryov, that this mystery deepens from a tragic hiking accident into something far stranger, more violent, and more terrifying. Unlike the first 5 victims, these 4 had not died of hypothermia. They had suffered catastrophic, unsurvivable internal injuries. Nikolai Thibault-Brignol had suffered a massive, crushing skull fracture. Lyudmila Dubinina and Semyon Zolotaryov had both suffered major chest fractures, with multiple broken ribs on both sides. The doctor who performed the autopsies, a respected forensic pathologist named Dr. Boris Vozrozdiny, noted in his official report that the force required to cause such devastating injuries was immense, comparable to the force of a high-speed car crash or being hit by a shockwave from a powerful explosion. He stated emphatically that it was absolutely impossible for another human being to have inflicted such damage, especially given the lack of any corresponding external injuries. And here is the most baffling and disturbing detail of all. Despite these horrific, crushing internal injuries, the bodies showed almost no external signs of trauma. There were no major bruises, no significant soft tissue damage, no cuts or lacerations that corresponded with their shattered bones. It was as if they had been hugged to death by a giant, or squeezed by some immense, irresistible pressure that had crushed them from the inside out. Even more bizarrely, Lyudmila Dubinina was found to be missing her tongue, her eyes, and part of her lips and facial tissue. Semyon Zolotaryov was also missing his eyes. Some investigators at the time attributed this gruesome detail to scavenging animals like shrews or mice, or to natural decomposition in the wet, stream-fed environment of the ravine. But others were not so sure, noting the precise and localized nature of the wounds. The scene in the ravine was also perplexing. It appeared the hikers had tried to dig a snow den for shelter, a last desperate attempt at survival. Some of the last 4 to be found were wearing items of clothing that had clearly been taken from the first 2 who had died by the cedar tree. Kolevatov was wearing Doroshenko's sweater. Dubinina had a piece of Krivonischenko's woolen trousers wrapped around her foot like a bandage. This suggested that they had survived for some time after their companions had perished, and in a final, rational act of survival, they had scavenged clothing from the dead to try and stay warm. This act of rational survival stands in stark, incomprehensible contrast to their initial irrational act of fleeing the tent in the first place. The Soviet authorities quickly opened a criminal investigation, but they were completely stumped. There was no evidence of foul play in any conventional sense. No other footprints besides those of the 9 hikers were ever found. The local Mansi tribesmen, who were initially suspected, were quickly and definitively cleared. They were a peaceful people, and the physical evidence didn't point to a human attack. The investigation was officially closed after just a few months, in May of 1959. The final, now famous report concluded that the 9 hikers had died as a result of a compelling unknown force. The case files were sealed and sent to a secret archive. The area around Koletsyakhl was closed to the public and all civilian air traffic for 3 years. and the story of the Dyatlov Pass incident was effectively buried by the Soviet state. But the questions remained, festering in the minds of the investigators, the searchers, and the families of the victims. What was this compelling unknown force? What could have caused 9 experienced, level-headed hikers to flee their only source of shelter in such a state of abject terror? And what could have inflicted those car crash-like injuries with no external signs of a struggle? This is where we must look beyond the simple, neat, and recently re-endorsed official theory of an avalanche. For years, the avalanche theory has been the go-to explanation for skeptics and government officials looking to close the book on this case. The theory in its modern refined form goes something like this. The hikers, in pitching their tent, cut into a snowbank on the slope, destabilizing the snowpack above them. During the night, a small but heavy, slab avalanche occurred. It didn't bury the tent completely, but the weight of the snow landing on the tent fabric created a terrifying pressure and the sound of a roaring train. In a state of sudden panic, thinking they were about to be buried alive, they cut their way out and fled downhill to what they perceived as the relative safety of the forest. Sounds plausible. It provides a natural, non-sensational explanation for the event. But for many who have studied this case in depth, the avalanche theory is riddled with holes, inconsistencies, and unanswered questions. First, the physical evidence at the scene does not strongly support it. The search party found the tent was still standing, held up by its central pole and skis. An avalanche powerful enough to create mortal panic and inflict broken bones would very likely have flattened it completely. The footprints leading away from the tent were orderly, described as a measured walking pace, not the frantic, chaotic scramble one would expect from 9 people fleeing for their lives from a collapsing wall of snow. The hikers walked in a line downhill. Furthermore, the location itself was not typical for a dangerous avalanche. The slope above the tent was not particularly steep, only about 15 to 20 degrees, a grade that is generally considered safe from major slides. The official investigation at the time, which included experienced mountaineers, found no physical evidence of a recent avalanche at the site. And perhaps most damningly, why would 9 experienced mountaineers, after escaping an avalanche, not immediately return to their tent to retrieve their life-saving gear? The immediate threat had passed. Their boots, their heavy coats, their axes, and their supplies were only a few hundred yards away, a 20-minute walk. Why would they choose to freeze to death under a tree instead of going back for their gear? It defies all logic and survival instinct. The avalanche theory also completely fails to explain the most disturbing and bizarre aspects of the case. It cannot account for the massive selective internal injuries found on Dubinina and Zolotaryov. A slab avalanche is a diffuse force. It might break bones, certainly, but it would also cause significant bruising, abrasions, and external trauma. It would not crush a person's chest while leaving their outer body relatively pristine. It cannot explain why Zolotaryov's camera was found loaded with a final blank frame, as if he had tried to take one last picture of something in the dark. And this brings us to the first of the truly high strangeness elements of the case, the details that push the boundaries of conventional explanation and are studiously ignored by the avalanche theory. It is the discovery of significant levels of radioactivity. After the bodies were recovered and sent for examination, their clothing and some internal organs were tested for radiation. The clothing of 2 of the victims, Krivonischenko's sweater and Kolevatov's trousers, were found to have significant levels of beta radiation, far, far above the normal background levels. The question is, where did this radiation come from? The Soviet Union in 1959 was at the height of the Cold War. The Ural Mountains were a vast, secretive center of the Soviet nuclear industry. The infamous Mayak nuclear facility, site of a catastrophic nuclear accident in 1957 that was covered up for decades, was located in the same region, though hundreds of kilometers to the south. Some have theorized that the hikers stumbled upon a secret military test of a radiological weapon, or perhaps were exposed to fallout from an atmospheric weapons test. This could explain the presence of radioactivity on their clothes, and it could certainly provide a powerful motive for a swift and thorough government cover-up. But it doesn't quite fit the rest of the facts. Acute radiation sickness causes a slow, agonizing death. It doesn't cause people to flee their tents in the middle of the night or inflict massive crushing injuries. The link is tenuous, but the presence of unexplained radioactivity remains a stubborn, inconvenient, and deeply strange fact that the avalanche theory completely ignores. This leads us to the second, and perhaps the most spectacular piece of high strangeness in the Dyatlov case: the persistent and officially documented reports of mysterious lights in the sky. On the night of the incident, February 1st to 2nd, and in the weeks that followed, there were multiple independent reports from credible witnesses of strange orange spheres and other unidentified flying objects in the sky over the northern Urals. Another group of geology students, hiking about 50 kilometers south of Dyatlov's group on the same night, reported seeing a strange, bright, pulsing orange sphere in the sky in the direction of Kolytsyakhl. The lead investigator for the case himself, a man named Lev Ivanov, was ordered by his high-ranking superiors in the Communist Party to classify and dismiss all of these reports. But years later, after he retired, Ivanov came forward and gave a series of remarkable interviews, stating that he was always convinced that these flying spheres were directly connected to the deaths of the hikers. He believed the hikers had been killed by an encounter with the UFO or a secret weapon associated with these lights. Even the search party members themselves reported strange phenomena. A member of the rescue team reported seeing a shining flying body in the sky in late February during the search operations. These widespread reports have fueled decades of speculation about military involvement, secret weapons, or even extraterrestrial encounters. Could the hikers have witnessed something they weren't supposed to see? Could they have been attacked by a non-human intelligence, or by a human force wielding an unknown technology? It sounds like pure science fiction. And yet, the reports from credible, independent witnesses are a matter of public record, documented in the original case file. These sightings of orange spheres are another deeply strange piece of the puzzle that is difficult, if not impossible, to reconcile with a simple avalanche. So, if not a conventional avalanche, what could have possibly happened on that lonely frozen mountain slope? The alternative theories range from the plausible and grounded to the deeply paranormal. One of the more compelling alternative theories suggests a secret military weapons test. The northern Urals were a known testing ground for the Soviet military and for rocket launches from Baikonur Cosmodrome. Could the hikers have accidentally wandered into the impact zone of a secret parachute mine test? Or a new type of concussion bomb? This could explain the massive, crushing internal injuries without significant external trauma. Pressure wave from a powerful explosion could do exactly that. It could certainly explain the sudden panic and the flight from the tent. And it would absolutely explain a massive and immediate government cover-up. The authorities would have every reason to classify the files, close the area, and create a false narrative of a simple hiking accident. This theory is compelling because it accounts for the strange injuries and the official secrecy, but it lacks a definitive smoking gun. There is no declassified record of such a test taking place on that specific night in that specific location. Then there are the more esoteric and more controversial theories. Some have pointed to the local Mansi legends about the area. The mountains were considered sacred and forbidden ground. They told stories of strange, powerful spirits and even of a Russian Yeti-like creature, the Menk, which was said to be a large, hairy, and violent hominid. Could the hikers have been attacked by something unknown to science? It's a thrilling cinematic idea, but again, there is no physical evidence. There were no animal tracks, known or unknown, found around the tent, only the 9 pairs of human footprints in the snow. Another, more scientific theory, and one that has gained some traction in recent years, is the infrasound theory. Infrasound is very low-frequency sound, below the range of normal human hearing, under very specific and rare wind conditions. a meteorological phenomenon known as a Kármán vortex stream. We are left, in the end, with a collection of puzzle pieces that simply do not fit together. We have a panicked, half-dressed flight from a perfectly good shelter. We have victims who died of hypothermia lying near victims who suffered car crash-like internal injuries, but had no external wounds. We have missing eyes and a missing tongue on one of the most severely injured victims. We have the unexplained presence of significant levels of radioactivity on their clothing. And we have multiple credible reports of strange orange spheres maneuvering in the night sky. No single theory, not avalanche, not a military test, not a UFO encounter, not an infrasound event can satisfyingly and completely account for all of these bizarre and contradictory facts. This is the enduring, frustrating, and captivating power of the Dyatlov Pass incident. It is a perfect mystery. For every piece of evidence, there is a counter-argument. For every proposed theory, there is a stubborn fact that doesn't fit. The case has become a sort of Rorschach test for our own beliefs, our own fears, and our own worldview. If you are a person who believes in simple, rational explanations, you will likely see an avalanche. If you are a person who is suspicious of government secrecy and power, you will likely see a military cover-up. If you are a person who is open to the possibilities of the paranormal, you will see something from beyond our normal understanding. The story forces us to confront the absolute limits of our own knowledge, to accept that there are some events in this world that may forever lie beyond our ability to explain. The 9 young, vibrant people who died on the unforgiving slopes of Dead Mountain left behind a legacy of unanswerable questions, a final silent diary whose last, most important page may never be read. Thank you for joining me on this deep journey into the frozen heart of one of history's most compelling and profoundly unsettling mysteries. The Dyatlov Pass incident is a story that, once you have heard it in all its strange detail, is not easily forgotten. It lingers in the mind, a chilling and permanent reminder that the world can sometimes be a far stranger, more complex, and more dangerous place than we can possibly imagine. Now I am truly eager to hear your thoughts. After looking beyond the simple avalanche explanation and examining the deeply strange evidence, what theory do you find most compelling? Do the strange, crushing injuries and the presence of radioactivity point to a secret military experiment gone horribly wrong? Do the persistent reports of the orange spheres suggest something even more extraordinary? Or do you believe the truth lies in some complex, as yet unimagined combination of these strange events? Please share your own detailed analysis and your own theories in the comments below. The discussion and debate around this particular case is always as fascinating and as deep as the mystery itself. If you were captivated by this deep dive into a historical enigma, please consider showing your support by liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more explorations of the unexplained and the forgotten corners of our past. And be sure to click that notification bell so you won't miss our next journey into the shadows. Until then, may your own journeys always be safe, and may your nights be peaceful.